Hello. I'm attempting to come up with a better way of classifying or helping you classify quantitative research. And to do that, we're going to do a little bit of learning about multiple perspectives. So that's kind of going to be the key approach here. So first of all, perspectives. It's a way of humans... the way humans classify objects is dependent on the perspective we take. So we have the power to switch perspectives. And we often get caught up in a perspective of the world, and when we're asked to switch, that's when we have difficulties. So classifying research is going to require that you take on perspectives, and we're going to look at research from multiple perspectives. And now, in order to do this, we have to think of research not as an activity, but also as an object. And so that's going to be really important to, that's again, taking a perspective. All right, 3 useful perspectives. I'm going to go right through: time, structure, and goal. Okay, so from time we have cross-sectional, which is a snapshot, a slice of life, so to speak. And those are written up in your notes. Longitudinal, which could be perspective, the research starts now, moves forward, or retrospective, and we start at the end, and we collect data about things that went on already. Okay, so that's the idea of retrospective, looking back. Structure, from the structure perspective, we have either research that's quantitative or qualitative. And as I said before, the first 12 or 13 weeks of this course are focused on quantitative research. We will look at qualitative research as multiple types. So we'll introduce them on the chart quickly. But in quantitative research, in terms of structure, we're just interested in experimental or observational research. I'll talk a little bit about more than that in the next slides. And exercise 5 coming up is focused on quantitative research, just so you know. And the goal perspective helps us see whether the research is descriptive or analytical. So in analytical, well, descriptive as it sounds, analytical, we're doing some sort of analysis. So the subtypes are prediction, exploration, explanation / causation, which are kind of the same thing. All right, so let's get into the weeds a little bit. So time, cross-sectional. So here's an example. What is the statistical literacy score of HIM versus nursing students today? Okay, slice of life, looking at what's happening now. Perspective, will a statistical literacy score of HIM students improve before graduation? So we're looking forward, and we're collecting some data now, collecting data later, and seeing if there's any change. Retrospective, has a statistical literacy score of HIM grads improved over the last 10 years? So this gives you an example of flavor of some of the language that's used without getting into the definitions. Now with structure, we're taking a little bit of a different approach because we're examining the way the structure works. Experimental research. The researchers involved in administering the interventions. We've talked about that in class already. So in administering the intervention, the treatment, or the activity. The key thing is that the researcher is involved in administering that. Okay, so it's not you going about your regular life. It's like you coming in somewhere and getting a pill. That's an intervention or a treatment. Or getting assigned to do exercises, which is an activity. So if you're assigned, that means the researcher is involved. Observational, the researcher observes activities. So you're going about your regular life and you're either logging things or the researcher is observing you somehow in that. Okay, many possible structures are under the observational umbrella. We're just going to be focusing on observational as a group in this course. In the subsequent courses, we'll look at cohort and case control, among others. Descriptive. So now, descriptive, we're focusing on goal as a perspective. So what is the goal of research? Is it to describe? Okay, so describe. What kind of things do we describe? We describe a characteristic of a population or the existence of a phenomenon in a population. So incidence of disease, incidence of lottery winnings, death, case fatality, and kind of the broad questions we're asking is who, where, when. So if we're describing the population, right, or the phenomena. Analytic research, we either do exploration, that's preliminary research, secondary data, small samples, so that's very early stage when we're just kind of feeling our way around, maybe with our eyes half closed. Prediction is when we're already trying to get a more formal, establish some sort of formal relation between exposure, some sort of exposure, and outcome, also known as independent and dependent variable. Causation, goal is to establish an undeniable link, or at least a very convincing link between exposure and outcome. Okay, so that's an explanation. This exposure or this outcome is explained by this exposure, more than just predicted. Okay, so there's something more going on than just a connection. All right, and we have a couple, yes. No, this is an extra slide in here. Yes, we've got that ready. Okay, I apologize for that slide. It shouldn't have been in there. Another set of perspectives. So this is from an article by Elakia. And so from here we can see there is application, objectives, inquiry mode as viewpoints or perspectives. And so we see pure versus applied research, so basic versus, and so in the health sciences we wouldn't use that. Well, there is some pure research in health sciences as well. And so the objectives, so goals, descriptive or exploratory, correlational versus explanatory. So explanatory is more like causation, correlation is more like prediction. All right, inquiry mode, quantitative versus qualitative, so I call that structure. So some similar approach with a little bit different language. And this is a slide you saw already in the first weeks of the course, or the first week of the course. So you can see the qualitative versus quantitative divide and some of the subtypes of each. So when classifying abstracts, so this is preparing you for exercise 5, which we'll be taking a look at this week. Process of elimination. Okay, so again, I've talked about process of elimination. I'm tweaking it a little bit here. So in the very simple approach, what I want you to look at is you have 2 steps. There's a 3rd step, but it's not on the slide. We'll get to it. Structure and goal. So first you look at eliminating experimental. Is there an assigned treatment versus control group? And if you can eliminate experimental, then that means it's observational. Once you establish the structure is experimental, with goal, you're probably not going to be descriptive, but is there a comparison group? If it's experimental, there will be an experimental group. There will be a comparison group, but if it's observational, then it might be correlation group, not a comparison of means or rates. Okay. And this next slide, we'll get into the details of this. So we have the structure, and I'll let you guys read through this yourself. I don't need to read all these words out loud. So we can see step goal, I've broken it up. Step 1 into if experimental, if not experimental. Step 2 is the goal. If it's, you try to eliminate descriptive. If you can eliminate descriptive, then the goal must be exploration or prediction. Okay, step 3, try to eliminate perspective first. Look for data collection description to get a sense of time. And here's a little flow chart that kind of gets across the same ideas that we're talking about here, right? So we start with, is there an assigned intervention? So I've used the word assigned as well. Yes, then it's an experimental study. Is it randomly assigned? Yes or no? You have 2 different types of experiments. If it's not assigned, then it's observational. Okay, so that's our structure established. Do we have a comparison group? No, there's only one thing we're studying. We're not doing any comparisons. It's a descriptive study. Otherwise, it's an analytic study, and then we either end up with one of these. Okay, so that's the direction of the exposure before outcome. Flow chart here. That's prospective is the first one. Second one is retrospective, and a cross-sectional study take place at the same time. All right. So we have, that's a flowchart that could be useful for you. It doesn't have all of the different perspectives built in here, but it's pretty useful. Yeah, okay. The details. True experiments. Okay, so these terms, treatment versus control. So treatment is also known as intervention. Okay, control often is of either some sort of placebo, but again, because we, in an observational study, we also could have treatment and control. We use that language, so it's not only for experiments, so that those words get used in various settings, but in an experiment, these are very strongly present. And then the next part is randomization. How do we assign people to the treatment versus control group? Flip of a coin is a really good way of kind of imagining or grounding the idea of random assignment to groups. True experiment pictured. So the gold standard we have here shows random assignments, right? You go either to the treatment group, control group, data collection 1, then we administer the treatment, placebo or no treatment, and then we end up with observation 2, and we see if there's any change. So that's a perspective. Obviously, it has to be a perspective design because we need to assign people to treatment or control group. How do I define an experiment? Step 1, is there a treatment and control group? If yes, then go to step 2. If no, then not an experiment, you're done. Step 2, does the researcher decide which participants get treatment and which do not? If yes, then experiment. If no, then observational. Okay, then not experiment. Now, I seem to be repeating myself maybe for you here over and over about this experiment, but I find that the students that kind of focus on this and use this will be successful in classifying research because it's really helpful. And the experiment, if you can't get your mind around how the experiment works, then that's going to really hurt you in terms of the classifying research. And we want you to achieve mastery as early as possible so that you can focus on other parts of the course and other courses that you're taking. And so it's worth spending the time with that. Some statements indicating goals. Cause. Okay, so this is important to differentiate between cause and not cause. So if you see words like effect, impact, that's an indication of causation. So does consumption of 400 milligrams of caffeine per day increase their GPA? So does A increase B? So that means if you give A, you're going to get more or less B. In this case, both increase, right? In the second, are children who play piano as children better at math? That's not really showing, does playing piano impact? Because maybe those people playing piano, those children playing piano, are ones that also have parents who help them with their math homework, or maybe they gravitate towards piano. And so maybe it's the same sort of mindset in children that gravitates them towards piano also has them better math. So we're not saying that A causes B, or playing piano causes being better at math, if that is even true. So relation versus causation, very important too. Oftentimes students and humans out in the world, in the non-math discourse world or non-stats discourse world, will use the word proof. And so we don't want to use that unless we have some evidence for it. So now you can understand the following statement. This observational correlation study found that an increase in reading assigned material is strongly associated with higher learning outcomes. And so with that, I send you to the last slide, but also to the readings And so I've adjusted some of the ways I've discussed the classifying research in the readings booklets, but I think that you'll still gain something from spending time with the readings there. Okay, so data types perspective, you have either compare rates, compare means, or correlation if you have two variables or more. So we talked about that in class. Data collection, it's either observation or survey. The word observation comes up twice. So observation in this case under data collection means that I'm collecting data from observations, or I can collect data by doing surveys. So again, two different approaches to data collection. So again, two different perspectives on classifying research. So just because you see the word we observed X, Y, Z, that could still be an experiment. Okay, so if you imagine I'm assigning you to treatment A versus treatment B, and then I observe you in the next few weeks and see how your behavior changes or something like that, then I'm still doing an observation from data collection perspective, but from the structural perspective, you're doing an experiment. Okay, so this is where me breaking up it from the perspectives will help you say, okay, which perspective am I using here? So that's going to be very useful. Hope you get something out of this video. I'm not sure whether you're going to enjoy it. It's at, what are we timing wise at? Oh, 16 minutes, a lot longer than I wanted to, and I feel like I'm speaking very quickly. Thank you for watching.